There's one molecule in our body that changes everything, and in this video, I'm uncovering everything you need to know about none other than NAD+, because there's no other product on the market that I've seen have such documented results, not only for myself, what I've seen it do for others, and in this video, I'm covering everything you'll need to know about the way it works, the mechanisms of action, and most importantly, how to make it work for you. This was one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets for years, only in small circles in Los Angeles and the movie industry, and then it became mainstream in 2018 when a video released of Kylie Jenner and Hailey Bieber getting their NAD infusion, and then everybody wanted to know, hold on, what are these celebrities, these mega celebrities, juicing into their bodies for anti-aging? All of a sudden, this huge boom took off about NAD from about 2018 to 2020, 2021. Then when COVID hit, it sort of died off because everybody went into reactive medicine as opposed to preventative medicine. Over the last few years, it's been seeing a bit of a resurgence, and it's making its way back into the mainstream, and it's something that I've never come off since starting because I think it makes one of the biggest impacts among anything else that I've ever taken, and it's going to make everything else that I take work better. Get ready, because over these next 10 minutes, if you pay attention closely, this will change everything about the way your body functions. Let me explain. Now, before we get started, it's important to note I'm not a doctor. None of this is medical advice. And if you are going to follow through with any of the protocols we talk about today, make sure you're only doing so under direct supervision of a medical specialist in this field. Now, let's get started. NAD+, which stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, fancy name, simple job. It's the one molecule in our cells that's going to turn food into usable energy. If you're new here, that's called ATP. As a lot of you guys know, I've become hyper obsessed about mitochondria, cellular health, everything that's going on at the molecular level, and this is no different, but it's one of the biggest factors that not a lot of people are talking about anymore. If you go back to my videos from 6 months ago, I called this that everybody would be on this wave of mitochondrial optimization. But what they're not talking about is that without NAD+, your mitochondria can't even run. Imagine trying to race a high-performance hypercar with 87 grade fuel. The engine still turns on, it just never reaches the full capacity that it was meant to. That's what having low NAD is like. Now, unfortunately for people with bad genetics out there, we're all born with a finite amount of NAD+. However much we're born with naturally is however much we're going to be able to use. Imagine one big reserve tank, and every time you exercise, every time you think, concentrate, every time you try to do any bodily function, you're burning through those NAD reserves. Now, this never used to matter. In fact, most people never even knew they had low NAD because they never reached any sort of dangerous level. But like everything today, we are seeing a massive decline. In 2012, they conducted a massive study by Masudi and colleagues that tested the skin of human beings across the board to see what their NAD levels were. Now, what they confirmed unequivocally, that's never been up for debate, is that as you get older, your NAD stores go down. This is fundamentally what causes aging. This is why people talk about not having as much energy as they did when they were younger. It's the reason that their skin starts to wrinkle. It's the reason that all of their bodily function starts to decay, because we no longer have the cellular energy necessary to perform those bodily functions the way we did when we were young. Otherwise, there's no reason we couldn't technically stay young forever. The reason we know this is that some people have really grasped this idea of aging starts at the cellular level, and then if you focus solely on that cellular mechanism, then you can stop and even reverse aging. Now, for some of you that might be a little bit younger, in your 30s or even 20s, you might wonder, why do I need this? We'll get to that here in a second. Because what they also found in that study is that NAD levels are decreasing even in younger populations. Now, it's important to note that NAD is going to decide how every function of the body operates. Just the same way that mitochondria is going to decide the way every function of the body operates, NAD is the fuel that makes the mitochondria run, because we've got mitochondria in every part of our body. It's in our eyes, it's in our ears, it's in our skin, it's in our muscles, it's in everything. And every cell has a specific instruction, a specific code that's going to tell our body to do the function it was made to do. So our liver cells are going to run a functioning liver. Now, if those cells don't have enough energy to function a liver, that's when we experience things like liver failure. Don't get me started on what happens in the brain when you don't have the brain cells active enough to run the brain. That's when we start seeing memory decline, brain fog. As you get older, Alzheimer's, dementia. One guy's been commenting this on my Instagram page, and I think it's hilarious. He calls them cell welfarians, meaning people who are poor in cellular reserves. All right, so we've got it established now. NAD+ is the foundation of every function of the body, and the way that our cells run is going to determine how well our body functions. And for a lot of people, this might come as a surprise, but it's one of the biggest reasons that people don't see the results that they're looking for. I can remember a time for myself where I was training really hard in the gym, eating what I thought was nearly a perfect diet, sleeping was pretty good, 7 to 8 hours a night, yet for some reason, I wasn't seeing the results that I was promised. That's because in addition to working out, I was also working 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours a day this time in my life, as well as having to make high stress decisions and running a lot of different things, mostly mentally, that my body had to keep up with. with. That's going to use up a ton of cellular energy. It's not just work out, eat protein, and the muscle just starts growing. In order for that muscle to grow, we know it's going to require cellular energy for the muscle tissue to repair and heal itself, which is why a lot of people who are in that upper echelon category who focus on training, a financial life, a relationship, and trying to balance all these things end up overtraining by a mile because their body's trying to keep up with everything physically along with everything mentally and emotionally that they're going through. Now, you're never going to hear this on a bodybuilding channel because they're not looking at it from this lens. And the shitty part about this is that all of those areas are now going to take a hit because they all need what that maximum cellular energy level is, but none of them are getting it because they're each being dispersed into different buckets. Now, before we dive into supplementing with NAD+, it's important to note that starting NAD+ doesn't turn you into a superhero. All it does is remove the ceiling that your body has set on it. This is a niche example, but if any of you guys have ever been in a golf cart and then you find a way to take off the speed limiter and then all of a sudden you're whizzing around the golf course, it's kind of like that, right? So just by taking off the speed limiter, the cart doesn't all of a sudden take off. You still got to push the gas. The strongest human example we have of this was conducted in 2020 at the University of Helsinki. The point of the study was to take patients with mitochondrial myopathy, which is the degradation of cellular muscle tissue, and then prove that only by raising NAD levels, we could completely reverse the tissue degradation. In this study, they conducted it with high-dose niacin. I'm talking 750 milligrams all the way up to 1,000 milligrams a day, which I would not recommend for the average person. I think there's way better ways to get NAD. But for the purposes of this study, their NAD levels rose by upwards of 8-fold. The results were indisputable. Muscle generation was rampant, but more importantly than that, they fixed the cellular disease that was rotting them from the inside. Mitochondrial biogenesis goes up, and what the most astounding part is that fatty liver actually went down. This is published human data that NAD+ alone can have direct, incredibly positive results on physique and muscle quality and density. For the longest time, we always thought this was just about energy or just about focus. While it's really good for those things, most people aren't looking at it through the lens of what it can do for our bodies. Now, on that note, our brains are cellular energy hogs. When NAD+ is low, neurons struggle to keep up. Who came to mind when I said that? Supporting NAD levels has been linked to better antioxidant capacity in brain cells, as well as overall better and faster cognition and memory recollection. For most of you on this page, you're in that upper echelon where you want to focus on your mind and your body, and there's nothing better, in my opinion, on the market than what NAD+ does for both of them. One of the biggest anecdotal reports I hear back from people is their ability to make decisions under stressful situations. A lot of people suffer from indecisiveness, and that's because they're unable to form complete thought, and they sort of halfway finish their ideas on both sides. The NAD+ has, for some reason, made it way easier for people to pick a path and stick to it. Now, I don't necessarily have any scientific data to back up why that happens. That's just something I hear a lot. Another organ that doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to NAD is the heart, because a lot of people are worried about their heart when it comes to anything that is going to raise cellular energy, especially when it comes to coenzymes. I think that's another taboo mainstream medicine hunk of junk, but here's why I think it's directly relevant to people who are focused on anything when it comes to their heart, especially older people. The number one killer of NAD+ is aging and metabolic stress. Unfortunately for humans, one of those leads to more of the other. So it creates this cyclical cycle of a depletion of NAD because one just creates more of the other negative. Restoring NAD+ has been linked directly to restoration of heart cells, as well as reducing certain inflammation in certain biomarkers. Now, I could sit here and talk about all the different organs it benefits because it benefits almost all of them, but main ones to note are going to be liver, kidney, heart, and brain. Especially for people who have fostered an environment of inflammation, metabolic stress, or anything to disrupt the human body that can come from drugs, alcohol, bad food. NAD+ can act as a restorant for a lot of those bad habits that we used to have in our early days: overthinking, stress, anxiety, especially people who went through this in their teenage and even college years, where they've rotted themselves from the inside from so much anxiety and stress, which has become all too common in the modern generation. Most of those people have shot through their NAD stores, and it's one of the main reasons that as adults, they've become more lethargic, brain fog has become more prevalent, and they're not operating at the level that they know they're capable of, and they're wondering, why do they have this ceiling that's been placed on them? It's from low NAD stores, which is why I say it's really important to get your blood done to make sure it's not from elevated estrogen or low testosterone or any of the other million biomarkers it could be from. But that's why it's important to only go through this stuff with a specialist. Because take it from me, as someone who's tried literally everything, is there's nothing worse than supplementing for things that you don't need. And then you end up creating a bigger problem by over supplementing areas that were already okay. I've done that dozens of times. One of the most overlooked areas when it comes to depletion of NAD is sleep quality. That's because everybody always thinks of cellular energy for just that. What am I doing while I'm awake? What is the production that I'm getting from my body? A lot of people don't realize that it takes NAD to get positive, restful sleep. NAD+ plays a very key role in the system that decides our recovery. People who raise their levels often feel that they wake up more refreshed and more restored. That's because while they they've been sleeping, their cells have been hard at work at repairing their body. Now, far and away, I'll say this, the people I see get the best results on NAD are people that are stacking, are people that are doing things like enclomiphene, TRT, or doing a stack of peptides like an SS31, a MOTS-C, a TESA-IPA, an epitalon, something that they're already doing for bodily optimization. NAD is like what pours fuel on the fire. It's going to give the body, and specifically those receptors, the cellular energy they need to perform the function that those peptides are asking them to improve. When NAD is low, the return on investment often dips. The way I would compare this most for those of you who are coming from bodybuilding background is you would never do a steroid cycle unless you've got your TRT base, because you know if you take that steroid, it's probably going to crash your testosterone. The same thing can happen when we take peptides, because if you didn't know already, the only thing peptides are doing is telling our body to perform a function that it already does at a faster or higher rate. Well, in order to do that, it's going to cost us more cellular energy. So if we're not topping up that fuel, if we're not giving it more, then eventually it's going to drain and run out. And the more of these things that we do, the less and less return that we're going to see. Now, I don't hear this a lot, but if you are someone who feels like, man, I've been taking peptides, but they just don't seem to work, I think one of the greatest things that you can do to make sure that doesn't happen again is look at NAD+. Either that or you bought it from some sort of junk source and you got scammed, because that happens a lot too. Now, the part that we've all been waiting for. What is the best way to take NAD? How do I get it? And how do I use it? Well, there's a lot of debate around this. One of my good friends, Dr. Hallen Chen, is one of the world leaders when it comes to NAD+ therapy and cellular rejuvenation therapy. He tells me that the single best way to get NAD+ in the body is IV injection, meaning that we're going to put a needle into our arm and we're going to sit there with an IV bag. My problem with this is it has to be dripped very slowly into the bloodstream. Otherwise, people can go into anaphylactic shock. Tells you a little bit about how powerful this stuff is. So in order to get the proper dose on this, NAD drips can range from 4 all the way up to 8 hours that you have to have this IV in your arm. For me, that's not exactly convenient. I am willing to sacrifice a little bit of efficacy to not be bound to a single position for 4 to 8 hours. There are 2 other modalities that I've seen be really effective. Number 1 is oral precursors like NMN, which is an oral precursor to NAD+. When we take NMN orally, it converts to NAD+ in the body. The other publicly mainstream to ingest NAD+ is subcutaneous injection, just the same way as all peptides. Now, again, I understand NAD+, not a peptide, but bear with me, I'm just going to call it one. For me personally, this is the method that I feel the most. This is when I feel the most impact, when I feel the most energy, and the one that impacts my Whoop scores the most positively. And when it comes to how much you should take, this is where it becomes very important to work with a professional, because everybody's body is different, which is why I want to take a second to make sure you guys know that if you don't have anybody you can go to on this, I did start a company, it's called otmens.com, where we have made this type of medicine accessible to everybody, where you can talk to a provider who will guide you down a specific dosing path based on your blood work, based on your true results, that is going to hold your hand through this process. Because the number one problem I see in medicine is people have just started injecting themselves willy-nilly with whatever they can get their hands on because someone told them they should, and it is what I think is going to cause the biggest relapse in health I think we'll ever see. But again, I'm not here to tell you that you have to use my company, otherwise this stuff doesn't work. I think there are thousands of good NAD+ providers across the country, but if you're looking for one that has access to everywhere in these 50 states, otmens.com will have direct access for anyone to talk to a provider and get help on this. Now, of course, I think the number one thing to talk about here that doesn't require a provider is that consistency beats everything. NAD+ is one of those molecules that the longer you take it, the better it will work. Unlike some peptides that I'm a huge fan of, like tesamorelin, ipamorelin blend, MOTS-C, epitalon, name a bunch, they all have specific timelines that going past those timelines ends up hurting more than helping, because it fries our receptor and it makes our body almost need that peptide in order to function. NAD+ doesn't have that problem. This is something that a lot of people start and never stop. Now, the nice part about it is the earlier that you jump on the train, the higher up your NAD stores still are. So you're not digging yourself out of a 100-foot hole. It might only be a 10-foot hole and you just got to fill some sand in. And now you're right back to having no ceiling. So like I said, if there's ever a product that I think almost everybody should be looking at, I have just not seen any significant downside, unless you have a really drastic heart condition, for NAD+. But again, don't take my word for it. Make sure you're only going off of what a designated provider says. But this is something that I've seen make a world of impact, not just for me, but for a lot of people as well. This is probably the one product that every time I recommend it to someone, it's the one that I hear back every time where they're like, okay, great. I'm getting a little bit more jacked from the TRT. I'm sleeping a little bit better from the DSIP or the epitalon, whatever it's going to be. But they always say, wow, that NAD, I feel the punch. Like, I'm just on it. My focus is there. My energy's there. And it's something that happens almost immediately. A lot of peptides, it takes takes a while to build up. NAD Plus is one of those things that you'll feel almost in the first week of doing it. Now, I do want to preface, for a lot of people who are going to go start NAD, it's not going to be one of those complete physical overnight transformations, especially when it comes to cellular physical benefits. That's something that takes a little bit more time to build up because we're reworking the body from the inside out. So for a lot of people who are going to be looking for the extreme skin benefits, that's going to take a little bit. For people who are looking for the cognitive stuff, that you're going to feel a little bit faster. Now, especially when it comes to physical and muscle tissue related things, those are the ones that are probably going to take some of the longest. But again, all it does is remove that ceiling so that you can go beyond those limits that you had previously had set for you. So look, guys, if you like finding ways to improve the body, improve the mind, I post 2 videos just like this one every single week where I talk about ways to do that. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so that you don't miss another one going forward. And I will see you guys in the next one.